Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. Happy Friday. How are you feeling?
Happy Friday. Friday the 13th. I'm feeling okay for Friday the 13th. I'm not leaving the house.
Well,
I'm just going to stay here.
Does it even matter that it's Friday the 13th? I mean, we're living in 2020. I'm pretty sure that every day is Friday the 13th at this point. So,
it's a little ridiculous for me to say I'm not going to leave the house on Friday the 13th because have I left the house at all this week?
You really shouldn't leave the house.
I haven't done much leaving the house for months now. But yes, it is Friday. That's good. We're going to take it easy this weekend. But we had a really busy week, so we should dive right into everything that happened on MacStories this week. All right, Federico, let's start with the Apple event.
Oh, yeah, there was an Apple event. I kind of forgot.
Way back on Tuesday, there was an Apple event.
Okay, so let me just ask you this up front. Did you get one?
I did. I got a MacBook Air, Federico. I've never had a MacBook Air.
Like, it doesn't really matter that they have an M1 chip. We all know what we're talking about.
An M1 Air.
An M1 Air, yes. An Apple Silicon MacBook Air. That's maybe an easy way to say it. When is it coming?
It's not coming till the end of the month, which is kind of a bummer. I guess because I spec'd it up to the top specs you can get. I got a 16 gigabytes of unified memory and a 2 terabyte SSD because I'm sick of managing storage. I'd rather just dump everything I possibly can on this little machine. So yeah, I got an Air. I got an Air because my 2016 MacBook Pro is probably the worst Apple computer I've ever owned. It has the terrible keyboard. The battery has not lasted very well, and I've generally just been disappointed with it. And while I don't need a portable computer a lot right now because I'm not leaving the house, I hope to someday be able to do that. Plus, I figure I'll just use it around the house and other places. I mean, I won't be stuck at my desk. I'll be able to work up from the couch. Whatever I want to do, I'll have options, and that's always nice to have. And I also just want to have a MacBook that I can, use the new M1 chip with and see how these iPhone and iPad apps run on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you're interested in the new Apple Silicon Macs with the M1 chip, we have, of course, overviews for everything. There's an overview for the portables, the Air and Pro together. There's a separate story about the Mac Mini by Alex, and there's another story by Alex on the M1 chip specifically. And of course, with the Apple event, we also did the usual stories with the numbers, all the numbers that Apple shared, a lot of performance and battery-related numbers this time.
Yes.
Videos, availability dates, all of that. And we have a special news hub, of course, for the November Apple event. I can't believe that we've done one Apple event a month in this late 2020 season.
It was actually, really like in 2 months because it was 3 within 8 weeks. I was looking at the calendar, and that's just madness, really.
Yeah. But it was also a busy week on MacStories for stuff that is not the Apple event. I personally finally released a shortcut update that I've been working on for the past several months, since before WWDC, I think, actually. MusicBot version 1.1. Now, I have all the details in the story, but basically, to sum up, MusicBot is the Apple Music Assistant shortcut that I released last year in December, and for the past several months, I've been working on updates based on feature requests and a bunch of new ideas that I came up with. So in MusicBot 1.1, it's got full support for compact UI and widget mode in iOS and iPadOS 14, which means you can fully use MusicBot on the home screen and in the share sheet without ever needing to launch the full Shortcuts app. MusicBot runs entirely inline now. Especially this used to be very annoying before. If you wanted to use MusicBot from the share sheet as an extension to say, save an album to your favorites or save a new music release, due to a bug in iOS 13, MusicBot needed to launch Shortcuts. Now, not only does it run inline, thanks to compact UI, and the bug has been fixed, but you don't even see the flow of actions anymore because of how Apple redesigned shortcuts in iOS 14. So it feels a lot faster. Now, one of the new features in the share sheet is the ability to check the release date of any song or any album from Apple Music. This requires Toolbox Pro to be installed on your device. And if you have it, you can check the release date for old songs and albums as well as upcoming albums. And if MusicBot detects that an album hasn't been fully released on Apple Music yet, it offers you to save it as a calendar event in the calendar of your choice. You can now use Shazam with MusicBot. This is a new shortcuts action that Apple added a few months ago. Now you can use MusicBot to recognize songs with Shazam. And unlike the new Shazam integration in Control Center, you can set a playlist to be your default destination for all recognized songs. So you can just, it's very easy. You can just press MusicBot on the home screen, select the Shazam option, and if a song gets recognized, it'll be saved automatically in that playlist. You can read the music news and album reviews in MusicBot. There's a new music news and reviews section that includes a bunch of built-in default RSS feeds for websites that I like Chorus FM, Pitchfork, Rolling Stone, Consequence of Sound, all of those. And you can read them in line, again, from the home screen. You can get a list of headlines. You can tap one. It opens with Safari View Controller in line, and you can just then go back and do something else. So probably missing something. There's a lot of other, visual updates and fixes and improvements.
Sure.
But yeah, this is a big update. And if you haven't played around with MusicBot before, now's a great time to jump in, I guess.
It really is. And I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I think I'm going to read the news more in MusicBot than I do through RSS, because I do like reading music news and reviews and things through RSS, but if I get behind on my headlines and reading things, I tend to just, I guess, mark them all as read very quickly. And this is kind of a nice way to not have those things accumulated in my RSS reader. Instead, go to MusicBot to take a look at them. And I guess I'll add a tip. And my tip is this: combine Music Harbor with MusicBot with the Shazam action in MusicBot, because what I've got is a playlist which is kind of my music discovery playlist. And so I use Music Harbor's feature that lets you take things from that app and dump them into a playlist. And I'm using the Shazam app, or the Shazam action in MusicBot, to take those recognized songs and put them in the same playlist. So it just kind of creates like an inbox for music that I want to check out later and re-listen to.
Very nice. John, you also published something on the website.
Yeah, the equivalent of, 20, 30 different stories at once, because I published my Big Sur review, and that was, the upshot of, almost 5 months of work and 20-some thousand words. And music, Big Sur is a really big deal. I think it makes, we're at a real crossroads with the Mac, and we saw part of it, the story with the M1 chip at the beginning of the week. And at the end of the week, we saw Big Sur come out, and that's when I published my review. And it's as much a piece of that puzzle as the chip is itself, because it's really the combination of the new hardware and the new OS that is designed to move the Mac forward. And I think, while we don't really have a clear and full picture of exactly where the Mac is going, I think we have a much better idea than we did, say, a year or two ago when we first saw things like Mac Catalyst. And it's an exciting time it's an exciting time for the Mac, something that we haven't seen in a long time. It's been a little sleepy on the Mac for a while, but now there's all sorts of things happening. So I was really happy to share this one. It's some years the Mac review has been just an iterative type of release that's not super exciting, but this year there's an awful lot to dig into, and that's why it's both the longest review I've ever done of a Mac OS review, but it's got a lot of interesting details that are coming out with Big Sur. So check it out. It's got it all in there. So that's out too. Mm-hmm. We should move on to the MacStories Selects Awards, Federico, because those are right around the corner, it's amazing that they are, because I feel like we just did these, but it was almost a year ago.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the third year of MacStories Selects, our awards that celebrate the very best apps in our community. And it's the second year that we're doing physical awards. And I don't know, John, but it feels like in the third year, MacStories Selects has already become an institution. I see developers, I see people talking about it.
I have too,
people expecting the MacStories Select Awards and wanting to get their hands on a trophy. So it's very nice, and these are coming back. And what can we share because if I don't know. I feel like if I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to spoil all the surprises. So you do that. I don't want to. I don't want to create any. I don't want to be responsible. What can we share now?
Well, I think we can share that it'll be very much like last year. We are going to have physical awards again this year, which I've been working on for the last couple of weeks, getting those lined up. And we're going to have a Reader's Choice Award again, because that was a real big hit last year. And the Reader's Choice Award is something that's picked by Club MacStories members, because that's one of the perks of being a club member. You get to weigh in on what your favorite app of 2020 is. And last year we got hundreds and hundreds of votes for that, and Drafts was the winner last year. And so I'm really looking forward to see what people pick this year, because I think 2020, and I know this from just, this is where I don't want to get into spoiler territory myself, but just looking at our list of candidates this year, it's really, really long compared to past years. And I think we're gonna have some fights, Federico. I think we might have some fights on this year.
That's the result of a pandemic, right? Well, a lot of the apps that we cover are indie apps. A lot of indie developers have been stuck at home. And if you're an indie developer and you're stuck at home, and Apple isn't stopping with their OSs, but is actually introducing major new technologies such as Catalyst, what are you going to do? You're going to keep working, and you're going to actually work more than in previous years.
Right. And so we've seen some amazing apps this year. It's been a fantastic year, and we have no shortage of good candidates. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky coming to a decision, all of us. So I look forward to seeing the results from the voting process of the Reader's Choice Awards. And we should say, of course, that last year's winner of the Reader's Choice Award, Drafts, will not be eligible for winning again. This is a rule that we put in place this year because we figured it's not fun if the same apps keep winning over and over, right? I mean, those apps are incredible, and there's no need to celebrate them in succession multiple years, multiple consecutive years.
Exactly. I mean, Drafts is a fantastic app, and it had some great updates in 2020, but unfortunately, it will not be eligible. We're going to move on to somebody new.
It can win in other categories, though. This is just for the Reader's Choice Award.
Sure.
It can totally win in other categories. I don't want to spoil it. I'm not saying nothing here. Like,
All right. Yeah, don't go any further.
No.
And you know what? And you know who else can't win an award? Apple can't win an award. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Apple folks, but you will have to, find your satisfaction elsewhere, not in the MacStories Select Awards. We just want to want to focus on third-party developers. Speaking of third-party developers, to sum up what else was new on the site this week, Best Photos, a new version of a popular image utility that we covered before. Got a bunch of really interesting additions to manage your photo library, filters and search, finding duplicates, updating metadata, new calendar view, really nice. John, you covered AirBuddy 2. Which I thought this utility by friend of the show, Guy Rambo, was still limited to AirPods and headphones, but it actually does a lot more.
It does a whole lot more. I mean, I think when this app first came out a little over a year ago, I believe it was primarily limited to the AirPods and the Beats headphones that had that chip in them. But Guy has really expanded what this does, and not only does it handle Bluetooth headphones in general, it also will report to you on the status of your battery for any Bluetooth accessories that are connected to your Mac. So, your trackpad, your keyboard, all those sorts of things. And one thing that's really cool, I think this is probably the coolest feature, and one that I really wish I had at the beginning of my Big Sur review, because I was running two Macs side by side and switching back and forth between Catalina and Big Sur all the time. What you can do with AirBuddy 2 is if you install the app on two Macs, you can be on one Mac, go to the menu bar item for AirBuddy, click on it, see your trackpad there connected to that Mac, right-click on it, and transfer it to the other Mac. So you can move peripherals back and forth between Macs with just a couple of clicks in AirBuddy, which is a fantastic utility if you have a couple of Macs for some reason. connected to the same set of, trackpad, keyboard, and display. And you can just move back and forth without having, two sets of trackpads or two sets of keyboards or whatever it happens to be, or repairing and that kind of thing. Just move back and forth. It's a great little utility and a nice way to keep on top of the battery status of them as well, including through its widget, which there's a widget that works with Catalina and earlier, and there's also a widget that works with Big Sur. So
nice.
Great update.
We finally also covered Craft docks. And Craft, I want to revisit on the show here and on App Stories, I guess. I want to talk about it all the time. It is an incredible new note-taking and research app.
Yeah, it really is.
I could go on for 30 minutes just on this app alone and what I'm doing with it. But all I'm going to say is go read Ryan's review. And this is the most impressive 1.0 of a new note-taking and research app that I've seen in a while. And, I've been using apps for a very long time at this point. I've been reviewing apps for over a decade. And especially in the past few years, it doesn't happen often that a first version of something impresses me. Because I don't want to say I've seen it all. But that comes with
but you kind of have.
I kind of have. and it doesn't happen often that I look at something and I see that immediate potential. And Craft is one of the new apps to keep an eye on. The things that they're doing with the block-based structure, which is sort of inspired by Notion, but done so much better because it's native. The things they're doing with wiki-style links and referencing other notes and automatic backlinks, incredible tool for research-heavy workflows. What they're doing with link presentation and being able to hover over, cards and get a preview. Really, really outstanding debut for this note-taking app. I want to talk about it on App Stories at some point. This is one of the new products to keep an eye on in 2020 and beyond. And I really hope that this is an independent team. They have a subscription. I really hope it goes well for them. I want to talk about it more in a future episode of App Stories, though.
Yeah, we should absolutely do that. And the only thing that I would add is that not only is it an incredibly powerful and impressive 1.0 for the iPhone and the iPad, but they did it on the Mac too, because right? I mean, it's an excellent app on the Mac as well. And to have all three of those platforms be as solid as this release is a very rare thing that we just don't see very often. So, hats off to them for their launch, because it's a really terrific app. And I agree with you. We ought to have a whole show just about that app at some point. All right, Federico, we had a bunch of news this week, and we've already been going pretty long, so I'm just going to go through it real quickly. There were reviews that came out of the iPhone 12 Pro Max and the HomePod Mini. We have roundups of both of those. The Mac App Store is getting redesigned, and I say that for Mike Hurley in case he's listening, which I know he will be. It's being redesigned to bring iPhone and iPad apps onto the Mac App Store, so you'll be able to download those there as well, and we have details on that. Test Flight got auto updating.
Finally.
Something that, I wish they had years and years and years ago. I'm still holding out hope for Test Flight on the Mac, but I'm not going to hold my breath either. Then we covered some camera-related things too, because Petapixel had a great interview with some Apple execs talking about Pro RAW and the company's approach to camera design, as well as Austin Mann's iPhone 12 Pro Max camera review, where he went to Zion National Park, took a bunch of amazing photographs that really put that camera through its paces and shows off how well it works in low light. And then finally, we also had a story where we linked to The Independent that interviewed Craig Federighi, Jaws, and John Turnus about the M1 chip. So, check those out. A lot of good stories there as well. Federico, what did we cover on App Stories this week?
On App Stories this week, we talked about the iOS apps we want to see on the Mac, which, a pretty important topic given the release of Big Sur and the new version of Catalyst. So John may have cheated in this. I was made aware of this thing that John knew.
I always cheat.
You always do. John knew that some of the apps that he mentioned were actually, in fact, coming to the Mac and Big Sur. So I feel like my loyalty to the show and the format of the show was betrayed by John. Still, though, it is a very good episode. I think we had a really fun discussion about which apps and why we want to see them on the Mac. So go listen, and as you're downloading Big Sur, listen to this episode, read John's review, and you will be ready for all the things that you will find in this new version of macOS.
I regret nothing because listeners will have a couple of apps that they can already download.
Never regret.
That's right. They will already have a couple apps that they can download and enjoy on Big Sur. All right, Federico, on the club this week, we had a lot going on. Of course, we announced that Reader's Choice Award that we already talked about. I did a behind-the-scenes making-of style story about my Big Sur review, talking about a lot of the tools that I used to make that happen. You had a really good story that I think, boy, I feel like I need to write a response story to this, okay? A response.
Well, you were called out in the story itself. So
I was. That is true. Both me and Alex, we were both called out on this one. But you covered features that are on the iPad that you would miss on an M1 Mac, which I thought was really good. And it's there's a couple that I kind of expected to see there, but some that I wasn't.
Can you believe it that I wrote about the Mac of all things? I'm writing about the Mac again.
That's true. You are. Well, in the context of the iPad, but sure. Baby steps, Federico.
Baby steps.
Baby steps.
I'll get there eventually. The name MacStories will make sense once again.
It will. MacintoshStories.net. All right. So the collection this week was from Alex, and Alex went through a bunch of his favorite highlights from the Apple event this week, which was great because there were a lot of interesting details in that event, and he covers those. And then we interviewed James Thomson because James has been developing for the Mac for quite a while, and we wanted to get his perspective because he's been through different transitions over the years, and it was a really interesting interview with him all about where Apple's going with Mac development in particular. All right, Federico, this episode of Unwind and all of MacStories this week is brought to you by GoodTask. GoodTask is an incredible task manager for the iPhone, iPad, and Mac. It's really powerful. I mean, the power lies in the fact that it's built on top of reminders and the calendar APIs. And you may wonder, what's up with that? Because reminders is kind of simple, and calendars is not incredibly power user-friendly. On the other hand, what GoodTask does is GoodTask leverages that simplicity and the features of being integrated with the system to build on top of it into an incredibly powerful app that's complex in its own way, but complex in a good way because it's customizable. What GoodTask does is it benefits from those system-level features, things like the ability to add reminders using Siri, super fast sync, and all sorts of other things, and adds to it things like customizable widgets. These are some of the most customizable widgets I've seen on iOS and iPadOS yet. Not only can you customize what tasks are shown in these widgets, but the entire visual nature of them, the backgrounds, the text, everything is customizable so they fit in exactly the way you want them to. On top of that, it has all kinds of smart lists that you can create using all kinds of variables in order to get the look and the tasks in a list exactly the way you want them. And quick actions. Quick actions are a way to enter tasks really fast without having to do a lot of typing, which is perfect when you're on something like the iPhone. Take charge of your task management today by going to goodtaskapp.com and checking out this app. It's really gotten some really amazing features over the last several months, and it's worth checking out if you haven't done so in a while. And of course, we have a sponsor post on MacStories this week that goes into this all in a lot more detail where you can learn more too. Again, that URL is goodtaskapp.com. Our thanks to GoodTask for their support of Unwind and MacStories.
All right, so it's time for our Unwind picks for the weekend. And this time, John,
Yay.
I don't have a music album for you. I have a video game. Or rather, I have a demo of an upcoming video game which is launching next Friday. So you have a week before the next episode of Unwind to play this demo and hopefully have fun with it. So the game is Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity. So this is a spin-off, basically, of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild for Nintendo Switch, and it's basically it is Zelda meets Dynasty Warriors. Dynasty Warriors, for those not aware, it's the genre. It's called a hack and slash. It's an action video game where basically you control a character in third-person view, and you face a horde of enemies. The basic concept behind these games, and Dynasty Warriors it's a long-running franchise by video game developer Koei. Basically, you control a single character, and you need to, kill hundreds of enemies on screen. Obviously, those enemies are weaker and dumber than you, but you are still one guy versus hundreds of them. So it's the quantity that makes it difficult. And of course, some enemies are stronger than others, but that's the basic concept. Now, Nintendo has worked with Koei to make a Zelda version of Dynasty Warriors. The Hyrule Warriors franchise is not new. They made one years ago for the Wii U, but this one, Age of Calamity, it's sort of like an official sequel. It's not a sequel to Breath of the Wild. It takes place before the events of Breath of the Wild, so I guess it's a prequel to those events. It tells the story of the making of the Calamity. So if you played Zelda Breath of the Wild, you should be familiar with themes such as the divine beasts and the Calamity coming back and destroying Hyrule, and the Guardians and Zelda and the four heroes of the piloting the divine beast, the four champions, piloting the divine beasts. All of that story, what came before the events in Breath of the Wild, is told in Hyrule Warriors. Now, the demo that you can get for free from the Nintendo eShop, which I played and finished this week, I reached the point where if I continue to play, there's an error message on screen that says you need to purchase the full game, which isn't out yet. It's super fun, John. It's a lot of fun. So imagine the graphics of Breath of the Wild in an action game where you can control more than one character. You're not limited to playing Link. You can play as Zelda, you can play as young Impa, and going forward, I believe you will be able to play as the four champions too. So that's going to be, you have a roster of unlockable characters. And in addition to the action of the game, which is super fun and fast-paced, seeing all these hordes of enemies on screen in the same locations as Breath of the Wild, it's awesome. But what really works for me is the subtle RPG influence in this game. How you can upgrade your weapons, how you can unlock different items, the progression that is not like, you do one level and then you do another level. I played Hyrule Warriors and Dynasty Warriors games before, and they got sort of boring after a while. But here you can unlock multiple abilities and you can upgrade your weapons, and these are the same weapons and the same items, the same artifacts that you found in Breath of the Wild. So it really works for me because Breath of the Wild is a game that I absolutely loved and played, hundreds of hours. So yeah, action version of Breath of the Wild featuring multiple characters facing hundreds of enemies all at once. Totally works for me. Go watch a video if you're not familiar with this game. I should say it is very fast-paced. You need to press multiple buttons very quickly a lot of the time. So for all those who may be suffering, for RSI issues or stuff like that, it may be a little tricky for you to enjoy this game. But, basically, if you're into action games and if you're into Zelda, I totally recommend it. I mean, based on the demo, but from what I've seen in the 3 hours that I've played the demo, I think this is going to be one of my favorite games this year, I think.
Yeah, well, and you have nothing to lose by playing the demo because, if you don't like it, then don't continue.
It's free.
Right?
So.
Right, exactly. So I'm definitely going to download this. I haven't played a lot of video games recently, and this is not a category that I typically play, but the Zelda angle of this really has my curiosity piqued. So I'll check it out this weekend. I got to say, Federico, it's been a long week with that Big Sur review coming out, and I really haven't done a whole lot other than doing that. So, I mean, it's a little self-indulgent, but, I suppose I would recommend people go read my Big Sur review, maybe? I don't know. If you're a club member, there's an ebook version,
Yes.
which is a really nice way to read it in the Apple Books app, which is how I like, that's how I like reading Federico's review every year. And so that's one option. But, it looks great on the site too. So maybe do that. But I promise I will take it easy this weekend and play Hyrule Warriors and maybe a couple of other games and listen to some new music and have something to pick next week. All right, Federico, I want to thank our sponsor again for this episode, and that is Good Task, a fantastic app. Of course, you can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net writing away and editing away. Federico is at Viticci on Twitter and Instagram. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.